My name is Dean Stevens, and I am called the administrator or interim administrator or fake minister at Community Church of Boston. We are so glad you are with us on this day, this celebration of Halloween and Dia de los Muertos. And we have an echo. Amar, you hear that? Mute the YouTube, please. We have a new friend joining us for music this morning, Rafael Medina, and I'm very happy to introduce Rafael. I know him from our peñas, which are monthly events that happen at Community Church, an open mic, Latin America themed open mic, but you don't have to be from Latin America. You can bring anything you want, be it a poem or a song or a political diatribe, whatever you like, on a peña. It's the second Saturday of every month. But today, from that peña, we have Rafael Medina, and I have a little introduction he just gave me. We've started the service, folks. Hello. Good morning. Rafael was born in Argentina, lives now in Cambridge since 1987. He's been working and sharing as a tech consultant. Ooh, we could use you right here, right now. Community educator and artist, collaborating with many organizations and public schools, creating and organizing workshops, events for children of all ages to foster community building and critical thinking using art and technology. As a musician, he experiments with fusion of Latin rhythms, interactive performances, improvisation in the streets, and creating peña events like the Noche Latina at the Mama Gaia Cafe in the late 90s, and the Opeñas of Encuentro Cinco, currently working on a series that's called Eco Peñas. Oh, that's good. I hope they come here. And the Good Vibes Lab. All kinds of great things that Rafael Medina does, and now he brings us some songs for this, our Sunday morning. Welcome, and thank you, Rafael, for being with us.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, everybody. Well, so I guess we're going to celebrate a special... Oh, this one? I think, can you hear me there?
Yeah,
okay.
You have to be close to the mic. You get the mic right.
Oh, really close? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get very close. So thank you. And what we are doing, I guess, is celebrating a very special tradition. And Pedro's going to tell us more about it. But there is a certain relationship to death and life that we cannot avoid, no matter how scared we are. The question is, are we scared of dying or scared of living? So we are going to start with a little milonga, and it's a song for death. Quiero enterrar a mis padres y que mis hijos me entierren. Quiero enterrar a mis padres y que mis hijos me entierren, y ya tener visto mucho cuando mis ojos se cierren. Después de haber recorrido montes, cerros, valles, llanos, después de haber recorrido montes, selvas, cerros, llanos, bien gastadas ya mis suelas y las palmas de mis manos. Si de esta tierra he venido, a ella yo quiero volver. Si de esta tierra he venido, a ella yo quiero volver. Que después de mis huesos un árbol pueda nacer. Y que después de mis huesos un árbol pueda crecer. Y hasta que llegue ese día, aunque no sé bien cuándo hay ser. Y hasta que llegue ese día, aunque no sé bien cuándo hay ser, voy a seguir celebrando cada nuevo amanecer. Seguir celebrando cada nuevo amanecer. El problema, compañero, no es tener miedo a la muerte. El problema, compañero, no es tener miedo a la muerte. Quien le teme a la vida tiene la peor de las suertes. Pues quien le teme a la vida tiene la peor de las suertes. Porque aunque arranque hasta el pulso, la muerte no es el final. Porque aunque arranque hasta el pulso, la muerte nunca es el final. Nunca se mata el recuerdo que es eterno y esencial. Nunca se mata el recuerdo que es eterno y esencial. Una milonga para la muerte.
It's a beautiful song, Rafael. Written by Rafael, evokes the great Atahualpa Yupanqui from Argentina, whose music I totally love and I've heard a lot of at the Peñas. Thank you, Rafael. We light this candle this morning for the lives being lost as we speak in Gaza. And that's not to minimize the lives being lost on the other side of that fence in what is Palestine on both sides. Unfortunately, nobody is remembering the Palestine side. I think all of Judaism and the U.S. government is remembering and sending aid to the what's known as the Israel side, and the Palestine side meanwhile suffers more and more bombing attacks and call it what it is, genocide. I'm sorry, call it what it is. Call it. I hope it's not, but call it a second Nakba. On this day, Dia de los Muertos, we grieve for all those children lost. And we cry out to our people, to our government at every level to stop this insanity and to bring an end to this horrific war. This morning, news that a mosque in Jenin is bombed. That's not even Gaza, that's the West Bank. Stop this madness. I hope I can make this candle stick in here. I probably can't. This morning, it's a beautiful morning. It just started raining here on our skylight, and it's a little bit. It's cold, getting cold outside, but it's a little bit warm in here. Why? Because our air conditioning is out for a very good reason. We have brand new HVAC in this building, but it got removed so that we could get a brand new roof, which will soon we will have all around this skylight above us. And the skylight brings in the sunlight, and it brings us the sound, the beautiful sound of the rain. That beautiful sound that takes me right back to childhood. Tropical rainstorm pounding down. Thank the universe and the Creator for the rain, for the sun, and ask the Creator to have us human beings come to our senses and stop killing each other. No, that's all right. No, you can do it here. I'll give. So a few announcements. Again, welcome to Community Church. We come into this space and it's full of humanity, books and books and books and paintings. I want to point out a whole line of paintings that we just got. They were a donation from my friend Loie Hayes, who got it from her friend Doris. I haven't even followed back the chain to say thank you to Doris for these paintings, or these posters. They're early Central America posters about opposition to U.S. involvement in Central America in the 80s. And when I have a chance, I will show the Zoom folks those posters that are on the wall here at the church. And they're a very beautiful thing. We also have some kafiyas that are hanging on our wall in remembrance and solidarity with the people of Gaza. And we have a whole nother new box of kafiyas that just came from Linda Cohen, our friend on Martha's Vineyard, who has a shop that's called Olive Branch Fair Trade. It's all Palestinian products. Linda Cohen, we ran out of kafiyas. A bunch of people wanted them last week, and we have more. If you're interested, come and talk to us. We have a supply. Thank you, Linda Cohen. We also have on display a sort of altar that is behind where we're going to serve our lunch. It's a whole bunch of Mexican skeletal items that there's a whole band of skeletons playing music. There's people in different home scenes, little tiny miniatures, and they're playing music. There's also beautiful crosses. There's a couple of Virgen de Guadalupe. These all came from somebody I want to especially remember on this Dia de los Muertos. My very close friend James Rivera Thomas, who I went to college with, who passed away. My wife and I were in Los Angeles. We organized a memorial for James, and we brought together college friends. He lived by himself, and we helped take apart his apartment, and that's what we got, was all these beautiful little Mexican items that celebrate our past friends and loved ones and relatives on this day. We remember them and all of you who have lost people. We also remember. Another announcement is that we have an amazing Friday concert. His name is Kingsley Chen, and he's 11 years old, and he's a genius, wunderkind, child prodigy, classical pianist, and he'll be playing a repertoire of mostly Beethoven, but also some Chopin, and he will be playing our beautiful piano, which doesn't get enough use. We have several, jazz concerts, but this will be a really special, unusual event. Kingsley goes to New England Conservatory at the age of 11, and it has special teachers, and it's going to be a really great, wonderful thing. This is like a little practice recital rehearsal for a big concert that he's doing in Florida in a couple of weeks. So that's this Sunday. You can also watch it virtually, or you can be here with us in Copley Square. I'm really excited about that. There was also going to be a Saturday concert, which I'm equally excited about, but it was postponed because of medical and logistical reasons. That's called George and Ruth, Songs and Letters from the Spanish Civil War, and it's a play, and it has interspersed between letters between a husband and wife, one in New York and one on the front lines of the Civil War in Spain, 1936. And interspersed between those letters are songs from the Civil War that I'm going to work up with a brother of one of the men in the Lincoln Brigade. It's a really interesting and beautiful presentation from Dan and Molly Watt. And that's postponed. It's not this Saturday. It's on Saturday, February 3rd. Another thing I want to announce is next week we have Andy Davis. Andy Davis, who for many years with his wife Andrea Walsh was the director of the World Fellowship Center. And he will be here live with us telling stories. He's a brilliant, gifted storyteller. The music that day will be Ben Grosscup, who is the director of People's Music Network, East Coast organization that brings together musicians, poets, actors, artists for social change, and works up 2 different retreats every year, and more events as well. So Ben Grosscup music and Andy Davis next Sunday. Like I've done before, I want to share with you a pile of books that each one of them tells a story. These are books that are in our community church library. The first 2 are written by a speaker who will be with us on Monday, November 13th. This is part of a 3-part series that we organized in an emergency way in response to the Gaza massacre that's happening. This is Max Blumenthal, and the first book that I read and loved is called Goliath, Life and Loathing in Greater Israel. And the second one is called The 51-Day War, and it's about the 2014 bombing of Gaza, summer 2014. Max Blumenthal will be with us in person on the 13th. And then I'll go backwards from there to the 9th of November when we will be airing a film made by Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen about that same horrific event, which happened every 2 or 3 years. Got to bomb Gaza again. It's unconscionable. So the film is called Killing Gaza, and will you join us for the screening of that film? It's on November 9th. That's a Wednesday. November 7th, we will have the other filmmaker whose name is Dan Cohen, journalist and filmmaker, and that will be a virtual event on Monday, November 7th. So look out for those 3 events that we are doing in response to the present events now, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, in Lebanon, and of course in Israel proper. Finally, another book that's in our library, it's called Which Side Are You On? 20th Century American History in 100 Protest Songs. This is, and I bring this to your attention because it's by James Sullivan, music critic at the Boston Globe, and he will be with us in December to celebrate the Peace Abbey and Louis Randa, who are going to receive our annual Sacco and Vanzetti Award. It's on a Sunday, December 4th, and I hope you will join us. It should be a beautiful gala event. It will be all vegan feast after we have the ceremony celebrating the Peace Abbey and Louis and Meg Randa and Dot Walsh, who were the main movers and shakers behind that amazing peace organization. Finally, if I can find my good glasses, I want to read, since we're on a Latin America theme, we have Argentina for the music, and we have Mexico for the speaker, and now we have Uruguay. Eduardo Galeano. I love to read these tiny little vignettes written by Galeano. This is a book called Children of the Days, and it's got one for each day of the year. October 20, are we 28th or 29? 29, right? 29. Thanks, sorry. Forgot what date it was. This is called The Good-Hearted Man. In 1981, in a gesture of generosity that honors his memory, General Augusto Pinochet gave away the rivers, lakes, and subterranean waters of Chile for a few coins. Several mining companies like Sistrata of Switzerland and power companies like Endesa of Spain and AES Gener of the United States became owners in perpetuity of the country's mightiest rivers. Endesa received a watershed the size of Belgium. Farmers and indigenous communities lost their rights to water and were obliged to buy in. Ever since, the desert grows ever larger, devouring fertile lands and emptying the countryside of people. Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days. It's like, I put this up as if it were the Bible, you know, the Gospel of Eduardo Galeano. It cracks me up. Anyway, let's bring up Rafael Medina again for a couple more songs. This is what the part that's called the musical message. I want to also tell you that next week we're going to have another thing that we used to do, which called 7 Minutes on a Sunday. Somebody who wants to come and talk a few words about some cause, about some issue, some organization they're involved with. 7 minutes of soapbox on our Sunday morning. And next week we have a speaker from Muslims for Progressive Values, one of the groups that meets in this auditorium. And he is from Gaza, and I don't have his name on the top of my head, but watch out for that next week as part of our Andy Davis program. Okay, welcome again, Rafael Medina.
Thank you, gracias. Thank you so much for what you're sharing, Dean. And thank you everybody for being here and sharing. So, as we are saying, Latin America, as Dean mentioned, if you can come to our Opeña the second Saturday of the month, come and share with us. I think the idea of creating community and working in communion and making this world as close to one as possible. There's a lot of desperate need, but also inspiration to try to get there. So this song is actually a little bit of a combination of all the stupidity of humans, especially in modern times, and a little bit of a song hope, but it's also a little cynical because it's almost like childlike, as if we need to talk to grown-ups that behave like children, and that's not fair to children because children are actually very clean in their souls. So there's something about remembering and keeping the child alive, and hopefully, I guess in these times we could also say keeping the child alive, keeping the children alive, but not just the children inside of each one of us, but the real children that are actually dying every day. Nothing new, it's not news, but you know, not just the starvation, but also now in our face with the images from kids suffering from war. So maybe we can learn something about the kids. And there's something that said that children don't understand anything. Los niños no entienden nada de cómo funciona el mundo. Los niños no entienden nada Los niños no entienden nada de fronteras ni de guerra. Los niños no entienden nada del hambre que injustamente les quita la vida. Antes de florecer, los niños no entienden nada. ¿Y quién va a tener la cara para explicar por qué tanto dolor? Los niños no entienden nada, los niños no entienden nada. Y tú, hermano, dime, ¿eres niño todavía o has vuelto a ser niño? Si algún día no te sirve ya la justificación de decir los niños no entienden nada, no, no, los niños no entienden nada. Every day it seems there's something else that's going wrong. So many crazy, stupid things right here in front of my own nose. But I'm so busy now, 'cause I gotta reach my goals. Hey, I got so many of them. I have so much to do, I just don't have no time at all. No, no time at all, so I say, no, I can't see how we expect to survive if we keep on going like this. No, I don't see no way unless we turn this thing around, round, round. The problem seems so big and very hard to understand, but we can change it all if we just think and take a stand. I don't see no way unless we turn this thing around. We cannot keep on going like this, no, no, no. I can't see how we expect to survive. Choose your poison or open your eyes. And now with this awesome business of killing, maybe a child would give some of us a little bit of advice and say, if we were one, there could be no wars, and there would be no crying, no. If we were one, there would be no war, there could be no wars, and maybe we would have a little bit more time to make it better with solidarity, thinking of everybody, everyone, every child staying alive inside of every one of us. 'Cause I cannot see no way unless we turn this thing around. If we were one, there would be no war. and there would be no tears. You see, you may say, who is this clown anyway? I don't believe in borders, dear. If we were one, there would be no wars, and there would be no tears. There would be no wars, and there would be no tears. Bueno, hard to understand for grown-ups, right? Okay, this song is a little more of a mix. Usually it gets a little transformed as it happens. And it's celebrating our shared destiny and roots that, no matter where we come from, have something in common. Same essence of dignity and same destiny of a peaceful world. So something like this. Maybe it sounds familiar. Ese hombre que se amanece antes de que salga el sol, y aunque siempre duerme muy poco, su sueño jamás perdió. Y esa mujer que en sus ojos, testigos de tanto dolor, nos cuenta historias sin tiempos que un libro jamás guardó. Y si pudiera mezclar los colores de nuestras banderas y aprendiera a mirar a la tierra como es, desnuda y sin fronteras. Y si casi como sin querer algún día pudiera soñar con un pueblo unido en justicia y solidaridad. Pongo a pensar, el silencio me acompaña, no lo puedo evitar. Recuerdos, preguntas que no se calman. Por eso quiero cantar, abrir mi corazón, compartir mi canción, para que llegue a tu corazón y así celebrar esta oportunidad que la vida nos da de compartir en otras que suenan casi como un cliché, que tantas veces se olvidan o se tiran o se reemplazan con otras no tan bellas. Serían quizás necesarias para intentar cambiar, por lo menos un poquito, intentar comenzar una vez más y hacer un mundo mejor donde haya un poquito más de amor. Un poquito más de amor. Gracias.
Thank you, Rafael Medina. Another new friend. We've had a bunch of just new music that we haven't heard before this year. And it's always a pleasure and a treat to hear new voices. We have a very special program for you today. And I want to introduce and acknowledge the person who will be making the quick introduction to Professor Pedro Morales. Just started lecturing at Harvard Divinity School. And if you're interested in auditing one of his really interesting classes that happen on Wednesday evening, 5 p.m., be in touch with me, dean@deanstevens.com, and I can give you the directions how to get there and whatnot. I have not been able to attend yet, but I'm hoping to before it's over around Thanksgiving time. So that's my little introduction to Pedro, who I've just known about in dribs and drabs from different places, but I really am really thrilled that Pedro is with us in person this morning, finally. And I want to acknowledge Ahmad, who is our indispensable tech guru, to introduce Pedro to you all.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, so Professor Pedro Morales is a researcher at Moses Mesoamerican Archive at Harvard University and a teaching fellow at the Department of Anthropology and the Harvard Divinity School, where he focuses on ancient Mesoamerican cultures and societies, the comparative study of religion, and the evolution of religious practices in the Latino-Diaspora in Latin America and within the United States. Professor Pedro Morales, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I like the milonga style of my good and old friend Rafael. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and we spent a lot of time together back in the late 90s. And very appropriate that he shows a milonga. We haven't spoken at all until we saw each other here today. And so it was really a great reminder why we were always such good friends. And that is that the very style of milonga is about a conversation, a very intimate conversation. It's not really, you really know what's up with milonga. It's about intimacy, the deep intimacy of friendship. It's the deep intimacy of what a person wants to say, something that is really at the heart of the very humanity that they have, and the other one listens intently and responds. And they know that between these two people, small group of folks, there's always a different element that grows out of that conversation through music, through finding with these tools of art, voice, glances, knowing glances, the deeper sense of what it means to be in friendship, what it means to be in this human adventure that we all share. So I was very happy and very moved that that long conversation with my good friend Rafael is still going on. You know, it still goes on and on and on, and that's a very reassuring thing. And I think many of us here share that bond, that deeper bond of that we're really what we're doing in these gatherings and these events is really trying to dig deep and try to find what does it mean to be a human? How do we get to the essence of that? And in doing so, there's a sense of renewal. And luckily, you know, that's precisely some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you today. You know, our folks introducing me were saying, Amar was saying, this is my first year as an actual professor. You know, it's been a long time as an assistant professor and a researcher, TF and so forth. This is the first time I get to teach about the comparative study of religion. She's very fancy, but it's how do people really find themselves, you know, getting to this notion of religion? And so before I go and I bring that whole concept of religion into the Day of the Dead specifically, maybe I can start by asking folks online and here in person, what do you understand by religion in general? How would you know, what comes to mind? And don't have to have a long conversation, a long description, just like church on Sundays, maybe that any bits or pieces that, what comes to mind when you think religion? Anyone?
Something spiritual.
Something spiritual, Rafael? Search for deep meaning, yeah, transcendent, yeah. Yes, Steve. Yeah.
An attempt to understand things that are unexplainable, that can't be fathomed.
Yeah, so this is like a inquietude. Anybody online want to share anything? Please feel free, and maybe Amar can help us read a couple of comments from folks online.
Someone says encompassing. Someone says encompassing. Someone says rejoining what has been torn or cut.
Yeah, the idea of religion is to religare, rejoin together, right? To make whole again, to patch back together something. It's religio, and religare. But anyways, but that's more of a. But thank you. Then, and now the folks online, you better be on your toes, because I'm trained to do this online stuff, teaching. Okay, so I'm gonna be calling on you all the time. So you best be. You know, you need to go get your coffee or whatever. Like, you gotta be on point, because I'm gonna be calling on you, specifically on you. I'm looking at you. Don't go anywhere. I know you're there. I'm gonna go to that camera and find you. You go to the bathroom with that. All right. So let's start with the second piece. I'm gonna give you a choice, because I have even at Harvard we have a very heavy theory way of doing things, and we have all these very scholarly things to do, and so I have that, as I'm trained for that. And then I also have this very barrio personality, that having grown in poverty-stricken borderland of Juarez, Mexico. And so I have a more of a personal presentation, and so I want to give you the choice. Would you like me to present to you in the Harvard, very heavy academically presented, which I'm happy to do? Or do you want a more personal Pedro experiential barrio presentation? What is it? What does it say online? Because I'm talking to you online. What's going on? What do you prefer? It's a democracy here, right? We're all about democracy and inclusion.
Pedro.
Yes.
Pedro.
Personal. Do you see people? Can you see like thumbs up for the personal?
Yep. Pedro.
All right. So, all right. So, just remember, if you don't like it, you ask for it. So, I'm gonna start by now bringing it to this idea, this whole thing of Day of the Dead. Some of the words that come to mind, perhaps. What comes to mind when you hear Day of the Dead, Mexican Day of the Dead? What's familiar to you? Anyone? Las calaveras, the skulls. Okay, that's good. Anybody online have anything to say? I told you I was going to call on you. Steve?
Colorful celebrations at graveside.
Beautiful, yeah, colorful celebrations. Okay, that's very good. What here you say? Coco, the movie Coco. Yes, absolutely, yeah. Anyone online? What about in the realm of religion? Where does it come from?
Los altares.
The altars, okay, altares. Anyone like they heard that how this is something that is a very fancy word people like to use in circles is a religious syncretism. Have you heard of that? What do you understand when I say syncretism?
The melding of different cultures together into something new.
How about
Okay, that's a melting of cultures into something new. Okay, and anyone online?
the cultural reappropriation of All Souls Day?
Okay, well that's something called culture reappropriation of All Souls Day. Now we're getting somewhere. Yeah, we got a better sense of how we, together have a general understanding in the atmosphere, and that's good because that now we kind of see where all of this is sort of like for us, for this particular community, a departing point. And you go on YouTube, you're gonna see all kinds of videos about the celebrations, about the colorful, practices that Mexicans have, and now Mexican Americans, of course, and everybody else is sort of tagging along because it's very profound and beautiful. And so we want to share with you a tiny little video, only about 2 minutes in length, just to give it, a flavor, kind of perfuming your minds on the tradition. I had a longer video, but I thought, probably just with you participating in describing what you have already in your mind and your experiences, you probably have a better setting. And so this short video will do. Why don't you play for us, Amar? You might have to read the what's it called, the closed captions or something. There's the colorful response. Guatemala, exactly. It's not just Mexico. Brought to the region by Spanish conquistadores. All right. That's a very short, tour de force for this. There's 1,000 of those things online, so I'm sure you can go search for more. But I'm hoping today you will leave this gathering, both in person and through our good technology, with a different, deeper view or an understanding of what this syncretism really is, or what the fallacy of a lot of these traditions, and in terms of how it's explained to the masses, and for those of you who are very Christian, very Catholic, I don't mean this is all factual. This is nothing here that is in any way meant to insult any particular tradition. But I'm gonna bring it down into what is the origin, the root, the deep origins, because I'm a professor or a student of the comparative study of religion. That means I look deeply at the histories of all these things and how they come together to understand the current practices. Where does it go? How does it, as you can see, even in places like you were talking in Gaza and Israel, these deeply held religions things have a powerful impact in everyday life. And not only there, but elsewhere, all kinds of places in conflict in the world. So you gotta, in order to understand deeply societies, societies didn't start with some democracy experiment. Democracies did it, nations didn't start by having some, because there were arms or because there was just agriculture by itself. The true empires of the world rose up because there was a cohesive cosmology, a religious understanding that really allowed for all these different pieces of a society to come together in a clearly asymmetrical way. And this is how the rise of empires really come about, whether they were in Egypt or whether they were with the Incas and people before the Incas, or the Toltecs and before the Aztecs themselves and the Teotihuacans and so forth. That's how, in the scholarly world, this is how we understand how that actually came about. And then when you go from there, then you see why institutions rose out of that. Governments rose out of that. Experiments rose out of all of that. And so this is why it's very important to understand these deeply seated ways that people have so deep into their DNA, so to speak, that then you can see how they will behave, and you can sort of get a sense of why they're doing what they're doing, because nobody gets together and organizes a massive multi-billion people ways of how they're going to react spiritually, emotionally to anything. But religion does that, and this deep. But so that's something that we want to be looking at in a minute, called the long event or the long durée. And so, if we can play the presentation, Amar. I want to start, since you asked for the personal version of it. I was a very, very, very curious and difficult kid. Very difficult kid. And I always had all these questions all the time. And so I grew up, you can go from the very beginning, there you go. You see that was my everyday, every Day of the Dead life. You go into the cemeteries and cleaning, and then orchestrating all these flowers and all this food and all this with veladoras and offerings and singing and seeing the older people in my family having conversations with people I couldn't see. And it was just them. You looked around and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing the same things everywhere in the cemetery. And it was just one cemetery out of many. So it was hard to get your head around that phenomenon, because I'm telling you, nobody organizes it. There's no central committee, or there's nothing like that. It just happens. And so I asked my grandmother, I remember being the curious kid I was, and I said, but how is my grandfather gonna know how to find us? And there's so many people here, they're gonna get lost. It's like, and he said something that kind of made my I feel the chills through my body. He said, they call me nones. He said, blood calls blood. Blood finds blood. So long as you're related, the people, your ancestors, will always find you, and you will always find them, no matter where you are, no matter what. Just like that, I was also silent. Like, what? Like, it was really striking to hear that, because it really didn't make sense. At about 5 years old, you don't really understand a lot of things. But it was powerful enough that it just made me very curious. How is the spirit gonna know, how do you get a call? Because at the time we didn't even have a phone line, like in the house, let alone like how are you gonna call the spirit? There's just no way to understand deep connection, the spiritual connection. So through Day of the Dead, I began to understand these crazy practices that in northern Mexico, where I was raised, people have been so profoundly present, and nobody ever goes to a lecture on how to be, how to properly conduct Day of the Dead, But so I was, I started after a few, when I was 5, a few months after that last time we went to that cemetery, my house unraveled in a very terrible way. And for the next few years, I spent a lot of time as an urchin in the streets of Juarez, Mexico, which is a very violent, very, very difficult place. And Jesuits came to the children. And the sort of, these church people would go out and do these missions to try to help out the people like myself. Not unlike what you're trying to do here. Good people were trying to and because I wanted to be like them, I put it in my head, what best to do with my life than to become a Jesuit myself. So I entered that world of trying to become a Jesuit priest. And I spent some time doing that. And then you go to the next slide, please. And the next one after that. And the next, so basically I got to the point where they asked me, in order to become a Jesuit, you had to give up any other way of looking at the world and accept the Catholic eyes, the Catholic lens, to interpret everything you see in the world and obey the orders from above as if it was the orders of a general. You had to, it's called the vow of obedience. I had gone through most of the other vows in terms of these long retiros, ¿cómo se dice retiro? Retreats, to silent retreats that Jesuits have to sort of get you to thinking and to prepare you, all kinds of ways to make those decisions. And then it hit me. That's when it hit me. I was already at university, close to maybe around 18, 17 years old. And that's when I realized, wait a minute. I have no other way to look at the world. This as zero. I cannot interpret anything other than the way I've been programmed as a kid. That is Mexican Catholic from northern Mexico. And no idea how anybody else thinks of anything. So what is these lenses that they're so concerned about me giving up? I don't understand what they're talking about. But something in me, I could feel it. Got really angry. Really, really angry. And it was there for a long time, sort of and inside of me, I got this thing happening, questioning, why? I don't understand. And you ask and nobody really knows. It's this kind of thing, you never leave that alone and just kind of follow along with whatever's happening. So I would ask questions of priests about it, and they all kick me out of churches. It's I'm just asking because I'm curious. This curious kid. And nobody could really give me good answers. So I got really upset, ended up dropping out of the seminary. And to the good credit of the Jesuits, they actually helped me find my way to Harvard University, where I entered and studied. And in there, I tried government and law and economics and so forth. But not until I found this thing called the comparative study of religion did I begin to understand that the reason I was very upset is because I didn't have the language for it, but I had realized that a whole part of me had been taken away, that had been concealed from me, part of my very heritage, my inheritance, my indigenous part. And all I knew was whatever came from the Catholic world, the mestizo world, and colonial world. That's all we really know, parts of that, not even the whole story. So I studied with these folks at Harvard Divinity and Harvard University, Professor David Carrasco and others, who introduced me to this whole world of the study of religion, and I started really understanding the indigenous past of Mexico. And this is when I began to sort of really get this sense for not only the Aztecs, but the Aztecs being the last group that had an empire, but they took it from many empires beforehand. The idea that they share this idea of God, as we understand it, is a God that is both one and two, and actually multiplies more than that. So this guy is the Ometeotl, a two God, or God in dialogue with himself. He splits into female and dualism, female and male. And it has all these both competing and interconnected relationships through essences. And so, it's not, it's so to understand, in order to sort of, you get to understand this idea of this one God that turns into two, and this, from the duality then comes the whole construction of their own cosmos, of how the cosmology of indigenous thought in Mexico. And that's true for all kinds of groups in Latin America. Then this is how they understand the idea of male and female, day and night, dry and wet seasons, the living and the death, as being both one and dual forces that seem to be apart, opposites, but they're also complementary. In other words, there's a fluidity there. There's always morphing. There's always energies move back and forth. And the idea of religion, what are the people to do with these notions, this cosmovision, this cosmology? And the idea is to understand the balance and if the season, the dry season is going too long, you would do right to ask for rain. If the rain is too big, too much, then you do right to ask the guys to hey, let it go. We're good with rain now. Let's have some, let the stuff grow, And so the idea is to find balance, to be in harmony with the deities, yes, but also with the environment, with everything around you, people within yourself, community, family, understanding these dualities, these religions, and in dialogue. There's always this. It's not just. It's a relational thing. This whole understanding of death and life is about how it's one, because it descends from the same Creator God, and it has a duality, and the duality is not one or the other, but rather in conversation, in dialogue, in tension, and in complementary to each other. So, for example, this is the Quetzalcoatl and Xolotl. They're twins in the Aztec tradition, which is on the Nahuatl, the Mexica tradition, and you could see that they're opposite and complementary. Tension, separated yet united. You go to the Maya world, you have the Maya origin story of the hero twins, Chilam Balam, and in the Chilam Balam is the book they have, and then Hunampu and Xbalanque. Is the Maya have their own ways to understand this. And then you go to other parts, the Tarascans and the Olmecs, they all have their own ways. It's the same idea with different names, with different story of origin, the same notions. That's what is called the hard nucleus in the world of Latin America. You can move forward. The next, this is our friends. I keep forgetting that I'm not connected, so I'm not controlling my presentation from here. Amari's doing it over there. So you see that that's the Aztec mindset. The twins, these two are brothers, sons of Coatlicue. And then you see them, they're fighting, but they're complementary. It's not, you cannot just have day, or you cannot just have night. You need both. You can just have dry and wet. You need both, and that's relationship. You have to have war and peace, and that's what these guys also do. This ebb and flow. We go in and out, and we need to find balance between those things. And that's. You go to the next one, you see the sample of the Maya world. I was just talking about that. And all of that is to get us to understand that in the religions of Latin America and Mexico specifically, we have this hard nucleus. Go to the next one, please, the next slide. And so the Mesoamerican tradition has a complex history. It dates back to at least 2500 BCE, a time when nomadic groups changed their subsistence activities to depend predominantly on consumption of vegetables, basically. this significant change in lifestyle extended to the fertile lands and involved these distinct ethnic groups and languages. You can find this in the Olmec of the preclassical period, the Teotihuacan, Zapotec, the Maya of the Classic and the Toltec, Mexica, Tarasco, Huasteca, Totoncos, Mixtecas, and Maya of the post-classic era, and the Inca are only some of the distinguished examples in the complex of tribes that share this common history. Today, their descendants from the greater part of the ethnic common core observable in Mexico and the rest of Mesoamerica. All these nations and their own traditions of honoring and celebrating their dead. So you find it in all these places. So it's not just one day of the dead or 2 days of the dead. As you will see, this comes with the colonial times. You want to the next one, please? So this inheritance that comes from this ancient thought and mythology is an area of indigenous social production that most clearly shows the persistence of nuclear elements from ancient religion. Unfortunately, the historic study of the native myths has been difficult because of a great gap in the available data. Following a vigorous initial interest in the ritual beliefs and customs of the conquered, studies of this nature declined, notably, and were only renewed toward the end of the last century. With the exception of a few important accounts in the intermediate period, we have accounts from the 16th century and the first half of the 17th century. On the other hand, there are the records of the last 100 years. Therefore, reconstruction of the ties between both extremes of the traditions must be made with limited information and many conjectures. And so what this means is that at the beginning, after the initial wars of conquering indigenous groups, there were a lot of people, a lot of smart friars and priests who were really interested in just ethnographically, anthropologically, just how people lived and how people acted. And so they were really interested in all of that. And that was great. And so there was a lot of interest, and this is when you have Bernardino de Sahagún recording the Florentine Codex, very famous, or you have El Codex Mendoza that shows all these traditions and ways of natives having to do with the children, having to do how they honor the dead, having to do the Aztec Empire alone had a month-long celebration of the dead, a month long of festivities, just the Aztecs alone. So we're not even going into the Tlaxcalans, we're not even going into any, just the Aztecs alone had a month of celebrations. It's a very, very important aspect of the culture and the religious thought, the cosmology of these folks. So of course, you want to go to the next slide, please. Those traditions that people had, the gap we see in the data comes from the fact that the church and the Spaniards, in the Portuguese, and everybody, every colonial power realized that they needed the information, they needed to understand them for the purposes of converting them, converting the indigenous people, seeing from what they do, what they already have in place, can sort of merge with whatever the Catholic Church already does, having learned precisely from Europe, having learned precisely from the pagans in Europe. Sure, they learned a lot. And so they wanted to understand the local indigenous groups in order to then translate, so to speak, the European playbook that they use against the pagans to convert them, and then make the transition to have these people become profitable labor. It wasn't the Christianization of it, it wasn't really meant to bring equality as it was originally thought. Oh, you're Christian, a Christian cannot enslave a Christian, No, it's actually, I'm sorry to say that, but as the evidence shows very clearly, that the idea was to subdue, it was to cut off anybody that will resist. That's that's when they in the many accounts in the chronicles they have these words. We came and we conquer, and then after we conquer, we subdue them, and then we settle them, we resettle them, and that's language that basically says that we found out who their leaders were and killed them. All these different leaders, whether they would be priests, royals, they would basically systematically do this, basically this idea, if you're against us, we outright killed you. So that would be the coercion piece, and then they have persuasion. But look, we're good Christians and we believe in the love of God. And you confirm, you baptize yourself and you become a Christian yourself, then you're gonna mend your ways, because everything you have done for the last few thousand years is wrong, and is the devil, and it's devil worshiping, and therefore you will have an opportunity to save yourself if you are more like us. So you can be persuaded, get the baptism, change your name from whatever it was before, and now you're going to be, for example, there's a very famous guy, Carlos Two Rabbit. It was the grandson of King Nezahualcóyotl. But so this is, you have the Juan Diegos of the world, This is how you have these mixed names between Castilian and Nahuatl or Castilian and any other local language of the people that they encounter. So that signals the beginning of this conversion. But the conversion was, again, to sort of extract wealth from these people and the environment. It was all about the land. So what they wanted to do is switch first of all, the inheritance in the terms of the traditions, cut them off and replace them with the stories of origins of the Catholic tradition on top of these people. And everybody who showed any sign of trying to go back to the old ways will be repressed, subdued, with the option of being either killed or converted. So you see this, and even though all of this was happening, nevertheless, the relationship between ancient and present myths is so evident that the comparison between the past and the present is highly enlightening. If we begin in the present, the variety of myths is great because the ethnographic records provide numerous elements that facilitate the understanding of the ancient documents. If we commence with the past, we will understand the narratives of our time in a cosmological context that was valid for millennia. This context, although impoverished during the colonial period, still provides some clarity to the religious beliefs and narratives. What this means is that the devotion to a common religious cosmology was in place long before the arrival of Christianity. In other words, Catholicism benefited tremendously from the fact that for millennia, the people of Mesoamerica have been devoted to gods and ancestors. Notice the constant hit at a dialogue. Notice here the constant hit at a dialogue between the surface of the very words describing the relationship between eras, gods, etc. Meaning, you already see this dialogue under duress. These people in colonial times are having dialogues with their own ancestors they had to repress and go from the public square to the very much almost secretly at home to continue their traditions. But that was a dialogue. That was the still in this tension. And the way they would interpret that, it wouldn't just be, they're being so tough on us. Oh well, we're just gonna have to go to work and that's it. No, they know, they would read the signs and they would understand, given their training, that life and death, that oppression and freedom are in a relation, are in a conversation of ages, a very, very long conversation. Just like my friend Rafa and I had, for a few years we haven't seen each other, and we kind of, as soon as I saw him, we're right back where we were when we last spoke. Something like that. But these people, as they're undergoing genocide, they're having that conversation with their ancestors and their traditions, and they're trying to make it survive and go underneath and stuff. They're doing things like stuffing documents important to them inside effigies of the Catholic world. There's so many cases of that, so many cases of subversion, of resistance, where people, in order to make sure that this dialogue continues on for generations, they hid all this knowledge. You know, they realize that these folks are trying to understand them, to kill them, to abuse them. And so they'll call you Christian so long as it's good for their purposes. So long as you're being a good Christian, making their money in your land. With your resources, you can enrich them as a good Christian would in your situation. So that we other Christians in our situation can enjoy the benefits of both your land and your labor. That's what's underneath this whole dialectic situation when you see these altars, and I'll get that in a minute. Could you please go to the next one? So far so good? Everybody still with me? Are you guys online still there? Or did you all go to the... Okay, so like many other subjects, when viewed in a more searching and connecting fashion, colonial religion contains and changes too much to be compressed into a narrow definition. It is here treated as the means by which people express and live their allegiance to an order that transcends human power and promises well-being. Somebody said that earlier, right? That's absolutely right. Religion is lived and experienced, capable, not merely imposed and prescribed. In other words, this thing we call religious experiences or the expressions, it's not flat. It's not something that is just prescribed by the church. This is what people are experiencing in their very oppression. You know, the fact that there's so much death. Why do you think Mexicans are so close to death? Because they live with it for centuries, especially under colonial rule. Because there was always fights, you know. But nothing like colonial times. You know, why are they so gung-ho about it? Because there's a constant presence. You know, at least as much as all these priests and all these temples and all these missionaries. You want to understand that, and you really want to understand that, you want to enter into a dialogue with this stuff, then you need to call it for what it is. You cannot expect to find something that will be to your pleasure. If you want to understand. If you want to understand, you have to undergo something. You have to be under it, feel the pressure of it on you to realize what's on the other side. In order to understand, you must undergo. And in this moment, what we call for in this moment is to understand that what we've been taught as Christians, and I'm sure there's all kinds of excellent Christians, but it's based on lies. It's based on getting people in colonial situations to work for the Christian elites with their own land, with their own brazos, with their own hands. That's why I warn you. I'm not saying I don't get any Christian religions. I'm just saying you have to fess up to what it is, to its true history. If you want to find, if we're going to be in a dialogue with it, you know, we have been in dialogue, one-sided mostly, with the death part of religion, killing and abusing for hundreds of years, all kinds of people. The dialogue method that we call in religions of Latin America or in the ancient past that has been there as part of our heritage is understanding that it's through that death that we will find the balance back to life. In other words, the dialectic part of it is about renewal and bringing back balance to this thing. And so don't get too despair when you hear about this is not just a condemnation of Christianity, because Christianity in itself, the teachings of Jesus Christ, is not necessarily bad. The humans attached to it with all kinds of nefarious agendas is what's bad about it. And unfortunately, that's just the human life. So long as you have humans, you're going to have mistakes. You're going to have greed. You're going to have jealousy and so forth. So religion is lived and experienced, and it's capable not merely imposed or prescribed. So long as you're in a dialogue, in a good exchange, there are things we can find. So let's go to the next one. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a technical theory here, and I'm going to try to move quickly to the next few slides. We're almost there. There's a good way to help us understand this by this historian, French historian, Fernand Braudel, who talks about how the events in a human life has short events, things that are like, some maybe somebody runs for city councilor and is a first in, the first woman. You have the first Asian woman now, Boston, Mayor of Boston, which is wonderful. But then, that in itself is not really a long event that, changes the trajectory of humanity. It's wonderful, but it's a short event. It's like a short-term event. Then it's like middle event, maybe some books that are written like, Shakespeare or something that. Obama. The same thing. Obama is an actor at the short event. It's not changing the course of trajectory or history of a continent, necessarily. It has a maybe, short to a mid-range event. Maybe, in other words, the events that maybe last, a mid-event would be something like a book. 100 Years of Solitude is getting to that point. Books by Shakespeare are already there. Maybe the music of the Beatles will get there. This is possible. Like all these things beyond the life of an actor. It's got to go beyond the life of the impact, the change. And so what Fernand Braudel calls the long event or the longue durée is stuff that gets really deep into the mindset, into the cosmology, into the biology of a people. Way, way after the death of any particular actor, any particular generation. Just like we see when I was beginning with these notions that go back 2,500 to 5,000 years, that's longue durée. The cosmology shared by all these different groups before the arrival of Spaniards, that's longue durée. The working and discovering of maize and how maize became, the corn became everything. It tied up to the identity of so many groups in Mesoamerica, particularly the Maya. That's longue durée. That stuff. Of course, the mestizaje that came with the arrival of Europeans, and now we have all these mixed race people all over the place. That is longue durée because it's gotten into the very biology of people. And it's way past the life of anybody who began to do, the initial couples that started to procreate children. And it's really, that's really one of the important distinctions to have. Can we go to the next one, Amar, please? And so we go now to syncretism. We started with this, what is syncretism? Well, syncretism is a bitch, Why? Because it's really a cleaned up way, a sanitized way to talk about murder. It's a sanitized way to say that there was a forced conversion to begin with that forced people to do their things and to get their traditions back into their houses and underground and continue to do it on the low while the authorities didn't see. The church tried to stamp out all kinds of the traditions in the indigenous communities throughout the whole continent, over 1,000 cities. Try to stem them up. If they couldn't, they never could suppress completely these traditions. They couldn't. That's when they realized that they had to do what they did with the pagans over there and say, call them, bring them all into something that they can sort of sanitize and clean into the liking of the Catholic Church. And this became, well, let's pare it down. And that happened. I'm not going to go give you the whole story of it because it involves 3 different popes, but I'm not going to go there. But just the idea is that they decide to pair it and bring all these traditions of Mexico specifically, because that was the most important place for the Spaniards and the Europeans in general, just on the trade alone. You gotta get Mexico under control, and as Mexico goes, so will the rest. Sort of like that. So when they saw they couldn't suppress it, then they said, well, let's tell the people that they're gonna now celebrate. Instead of every community their own way, they're going to celebrate it to this Day of the Dead, what's it called? All Saints, All Souls. All Saints, All Souls. That's how they brought it in. And that's when some people are confused as to say, oh, the Europeans brought this stuff in. No. They couldn't get rid of it, so they tried to merge it with what they had that had worked in Europe. But, they made a distinction. They call it the faithful. The All Souls, the faithful All Souls Day. In other words, you had to be a Catholic faithful in order to even be remembered or celebrated, prayed for within the Catholic Church. And los fieles difuntos, they call it. Dia de los fieles difuntos. And then it's a whole exercise about, first you get the children, you get the one day, and then the adults, the second day. A condensed version because they had all kinds of days, because if somebody was, pregnant women die in birth, that's a particular day. If you have people who were drowned in a river, that's another way. If somebody killed themselves, it's a different way. And so because they say, let's go combine them all into these 2 days. And this is how you get the days of the day of today. Let's go to the next slide. So, now this word syncretism now is really corporate talk to basically gloss over all these things that had happened that were really, really terrible. And so scholars began to really get into this. I won't give you all the boring technical explanations of it, but I can tell you they were already a group of theologians discussing how to talk about all these, this convergence of all these different groups, and this is where the word syncretism comes. How do we talk about the fact that we force them to? And they call it guided syncretism. And then for anything else that came more like without the direct direction of the church, they called it spontaneous syncretism. And that's a very interesting thing, which we'll come back later. So let's go to the next slide. So, and let's move to the next one, just to I'm gonna try to just go through, because this is more of the theory part. As you can see, is very small letters, and I don't want to bore you with all of that. But let's go to the next one, and so I'll give you a briefing of what this means. So the once we get these people coming in and seeing that there's nothing more they can do but to accept the practices, then they start creating an academic frame to talk about all this stuff. But the reality is that they have been defeated by the long event, by the long-standing traditions of indigenous communities that have, in that dialogue, they understand that it's just a matter of time before they absorb into their own ways anything you throw at them. In this case, they had already by this time, in the 19th century, they already taken down a whole bunch of the structure, the power structure that had come in to enslave them. And you see a lot of revolutions, you see a lot of movements of people, and suddenly the church still around, and still to this day still has a lot of power, especially behind the scenes, still very much connected to powerful figures behind the scenes, not as abrupt as it used to be, but the bottom line is there's no two ways about it. The decline of Christianity and Catholicism and Christianity is still is every year more evident, and that's a whole other lecture. But and what's happening now is more of the rise of the unaffiliated, so to speak, and within that not declare affiliation. This is especially people under 30. There is a tremendous return to all ways, to trying to repatch all traditions. Day of the Dead is one of those. So let's go to the next slide. And the next one. So basically, and so what you're seeing is an increase in these celebrations that you see of Day of the Dead now, this syncretism that used to be specifically Christian, Catholic, and indigenous. Now it includes all kinds of stuff. It includes witchcraft. It includes agnostic folks. It includes even Judaism. It includes everything and everything you can think of is now expressed in these practices. The way people have internalized death, having to say goodbye to loved ones and trying to remember them and trying to like invoke them into your presence in these celebrations is so powerful that folks are beyond Christianity. They have merged into a cacophony of all kinds of practices. And so this syncretism is no longer really an adequate word, whether guided or spontaneous, to describe what's truly happening. Instead, what's happening is it's just a term that is beginning to get some traction in academic circles, is the idea of multiple belongings. That no longer are we trying to define people and the way they remember their death based on Christianity, based on even indigenous people. Is a mixture of all of that. It depends on the family of the individual. And then they are actually expressing that internal experience of their ancestors and their religious beliefs, and they're manifesting them in all kinds of ways. And you see it in the music and the art and whatever they put on the ofrendas, the memory, everything. So unfortunately, people in the Catholic tradition will tell you, no, this is the right way of doing an altar, which in the Catholic tradition, conservative Catholics will have a very specific way of doing it, whereas the rest of the world, the unaffiliated, the non-conforming, will be like, yeah, and then just go and do whatever they want to do, you know? It's exactly what's happening everywhere, you know, everywhere. And that's, in other words, that's the future. What does it mean? It means that you can see the day when all these very heavy-duty policies of the church, of Christianity, that they had to implement in order to extract that wealth into colonial times, in that conversation over the long event of colonialism and the resistance that have been causing that hybridity called syncretism, it's actually moving in the direction of the syncretic folks, of the folks that are saying, no, I'm going to push back against stuff, and I'm not going to take your word for it anymore, Christianity. I'm not going to take your word for it anymore, Catholics or Protestants or whatever. You stay there, and we're going to celebrate, and we're going to do as we see fit. And that's a big pushback. And that spells, as that grows, that spells the doom for the Christian mindset in the Christian world, unless they can adapt to it and merge with this thing and become one with it. Or it's like, you know, the way I think about it is like, imagine somebody comes in, sees real estate, and it goes in without really understanding the ground very well, sets the foundations of their mansion, very heavy duty, very heavy mansion, partially on quicksands without realizing it. And you see it in Mexico City all over the place. The water settlement going down, and it's really interesting the way that analogy works. But that's what Christianity has done in the colonial world. They have placed their church, and that is, and I'm telling you, that is one very strong critique I have, and I think a lot of us do. That is the way Christianity got itself into the Americas. It's a house forcibly built on top of somebody else's land. It's a house built forcibly on someone else's land. And a lot of this land had a quicksand underneath. And so you see how it crumbles and how it's losing power in all kinds of ways. Why? Because it's proven to be ineffective, given the reality on the ground. It's proven to be insufficient, given the violence and the poverty and the oppression that the Americas had suffered under colonial rule, sanctioned and promoted by the church and Christianity in general. And so, so this brings us to can you move to the next? Yeah, there you go. Let's go to the next one. To the last part. So we'll keep going. Another one. And one more. I'm going to skip all this Inquisition stuff, which is the enforcement mechanism of how to get this syncretism to work. It basically pushes everything down to these practices of silencing and killing critics, inquisition for the middle class and rich, the office of extirpation for the poor. And so let's go to the next one. So that's I can give you about 3 lectures just on that. So I'm just gonna go to the next one. And so I'm gonna bring in this guy. He's a Russian guy, and I know Russia is not popular right now, but this guy is way, way beyond. Comes from a long time ago. And what's interesting about this guy, keep going, is he has this theory of the dialogic imaginations. And I'm just going to focus on the idea of dialogue, So you go to the next one. So he's saying that all language, this is Mikhail Bakhtin speaking, all language is in essence a dialogical exchange, and that this endows all language with a particular ethical and political force. In other words, what it means is that in true language, through this dialogue, we can find that there is the opportunity to connect to the ethical and to the political force. In other words, that activism that organizations such as this looks for is actually to be found in that dialogue, in that conversation, and finding it. And I think this is a good example. This church is a good example of having this dialogue all the time. All these dialogues happening. And what is it about? It's about finding that humanity, finding the relationship to each other, the relationship to the past, the relationship to the lands, the relationship to nature. What does history, what does nature owe us? And what do we owe it? So why? Because it is in those conversations, in those areas where all these things converge and are pushing and pulling, and the ideas are exchanging, and that we possibly can find what it really means to be human, what it really means to belong in a society that actually understands that we're in dialogue with each other all the time. And so Day of the Dead is this dialogue, this trying to be in balance between life and death, not just letting death have the last word. So, can we have the next one? So let's go to the next one. And so what is so special about Day of the Dead? This is a way not only to resist whatever colonial pressure, but to engage in exploring and defining meaning somewhere between the dualities, day and night, dry and wet seasons, life and death. By engaging in these traditions, people derive meaning and belonging. This dialogue with nature, the gods, the dead, enable the protection, preservation, and promotion of ancient knowledge passed down through millennia, long before any colonizers tried to install Christianity on the moving sands that Mexican Mesoamerican can be, for any Mexican land can be, for any foreign cosmology. It might work for some time, but it is bound to eventually be swallowed and absorbed by the slow-moving yet inevitable longue durée of our common story. Let's go to the next slide. And so that's why you see people bringing joy, music, food, all of these things, and it's key to do so, especially with the joyful part. It is to say that in the words of this Zapotec poet, he says to his daughter, daughter, niña, cuando yo muera, no llores sobre mi tumba. Don't cry over my grave. Toca sones alegres, mi vida, my life, my love, my life. Play joyful music. Sing for me la sandunga. It's a very traditional Zapotec song. Don't cry for me. No llores. No me llores. Don't cry for me. For if you cry, I suffer. But if instead you sing, my love, my life, I always live. I never die. and it's that beautiful relationship of what is the other death for Mexicans and Mexicans. And so to bring it back home, that's for Andres Enestrosa. Go to the next slide. And then I think it's our final slide. So what it is about Mexican Day of the Dead is at its root. It's about giving life the upper hand, to bring balance back in that dialogue. And to now that I'm here in Boston, and I have 3 boys, my first pork is actually the second, because I have another one that I have raised. My son, Eli, he is like super curious and super hyper like me, like I was when I was his age. I guess this guy is like, I can see what a problem I was. So always asking questions, and it's wonderful. And about 2 years ago, during COVID, we were setting up the altar. I was setting up because I always do it at home. And he was telling me, he asked me, Dad, how would all these people know how to come and find us in Boston? And you're not in Mexico. And then my grandmother's words came back roaring to me, say, son, la sangre llama la sangre. Blood finds blood. They will find you no matter where you go. They will know how to, they're connected forever to you. We all are. And now he's going to have to choose and understand all this stuff and pick and choose what he's going to carry on in his own lifetime. And so I hope and I pray, like all of you, that he gives life the upper hand. Thank you. All right, so we're down or questions. Una canción más. Sí, sí, claro. Sí. Do the last one, the last slide. You can.
Go right here and say, who is Andres Enestrosa? Is that your?
This is the poet from the Zapotec poet.
Zapotec
Very good story
poet.
about him.
That's a beautiful PowerPoint, and I want a copy of it. It has some beautiful images and wonderful poetry, and thank you so much for being with us, Pedro. So we're going to end with one last song, but not before we do a little bit of a fundraising pitch. We depend on your largesse for us to continue into the future. You might have received this fundraising letter if you have a paper that comes to you from us in the mail, or you will receive it soon by email. It's a cry out to you about a present crisis that we're in because our tenant downstairs is no longer there, a restaurant. The good news is that it's a temporary crisis, and we are very confident that we will have another tenant there very soon. But it takes quite a bit of time, the process, and in the meantime, we are in a crunch. So that's my little pitch for Community Church of Boston. And one little more thing before introducing Rafael. Pedro, I hope that we can start a relationship between Community Church and Harvard Divinity School, because I swear that in our 5th floor, the archives of this church, there is lots of material for somebody's PhD dissertation, or for a book about who we are and what our amazing history and our present and our future is going to be. You celebrate history, and you sort of celebrate Day of the Dead, and those archives are our ancestors in a way, and we celebrate them. Also, just a moment to remember in particular 2 fallen members of Community Church who have passed this year, and remember them just as leaders and foundations of this church. John Mannheim, and I say John Mannheim presente. And the other one is Diane Lerman, and I say Diane Lerman presente. And with that, oops, he was going to go get coffee before he came to sing his last song. Rafael Medina to join us for one last song before a short Q&A, because we have a beautiful luncheon waiting for us, thanks to Luis Guzman, our cook. Thank you again, Rafael and Pedro. and hopefully a little bit of a Q&A after Rafael, but we're hungry.
Very quick song. Yes. Thank you, Dean. And thank you, Pedro. Powerful reflections, presentation. And yes, remembering, very well said, remembering the connections that transcend time. So there's something about that ever-present aspect of communication, and time is an illusion sometimes, and somehow we know in friendships, and we know with our relatives that are no longer with us, and with those people that we don't even know, and they are somehow the same blood, the blood of humanity. So celebrating that, actually there's a little sound here that is, I don't hear the sound, but is it okay? Okay, that should be, is that, can you hear that?
Fine.
Okay. ¿Qué puedo yo decir de un hombre que dijo tanto con el silencio y con su ejemplo? Wearing his shirt, that's the only thing I could say when I was trying to sing to my dad when he died over 20 years ago. And in that, it was easy to recognize the permanence, the blood, and all that stuff that cannot be put into words. And somehow we just understand, we know as part of who we are, which it's nice for keeping the balance between what we call life and what we call death. So there's a little love, cynical conversation, maybe, poem, with this lady that wants us so bad. It's a way of representing something. Obviously there's playfulness and cynicism, but death has been portrayed as this lady that we kind of run away from, but somehow always gets us, or get us. I don't know if it's an image that we could reformulate, but for the purposes of this short conversation, it's somebody that wants us. So I can say, hey, prometo entregarme fiel a tu abrazo, frío y eterno. Pero no vengas a buscarme todavía. Espera, déjame. Yo te prometo, voy a ir a encontrarte, ahí, allá, al final de mi camino. Y sí, de alguna forma, aunque vos te vas a quedar conmigo, yo estoy enamorado de la otra, de la vida. Y lo nuestro va a ser corto. Así que, por favor, déjame vivir. So, it's a little bit of a cynical way of telling death that since in that kind of shape she gets us, there's still that longing for treasuring the ephemerality of this miracle that we call being alive. And hopefully we're using that limited time, 4,000 weeks or so, to do something about what stays, that continuity and the transformation. So La Llorona was something that I was not thinking of singing, and I will not actually, but I will say that it's impressive to think that one way of looking at that death is the one of the people that we are close to. In this case, La Llorona lost her loved one because he had to go fight. And after he was killed, she found out very sad news. He was no longer going to be alive, no longer coming back. But a couple of weeks after, or a month after, she found out that somehow he was staying because she was pregnant. She had a kid. And from then on the 30th of October, I guess, they would get together and have dinner. Her child, on the realm and the universe of the living, and the departed husband from the other realm, and they would just get together. So I guess that's a simple way to reflect on the continuity, the permanence, the transformation, and the fact that as permanent as death seems to be, life is unstoppable. Hopefully for all of us, in transformation we stay. So here we go with and it's not sad. Yo le pregunto, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Yo le pregunto, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Si se levanta temprano, ay, está jodida. Dígame usted, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Mire esos muchachos en las calles pidiendo a gritos. Cuánto hambre, compadre, cuánto hambre, pidiendo a gritos en nuestras calles. Y por si acaso no sabe, yo le pregunto, ¿cuántos niños conocen de este mundo? En tantos lugares que usted no fue, muriendo de guerra y también de sed. Le pregunto, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Le pregunto, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Y por si no se olviden, vamos a ver este mundo que está al revés. Dígame usted, compadre, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Si cerramos los ojos, no va a creer. Hace falta, compadre, que estemos vivos, no respirando, cuidado, digo, vivos. Cada día y cada detalle, vivos. Cada día y cada detalle, digo, vivos. Yo le pregunto, compadre, ¿qué es la vida? Piénselo tranquilo y después me diga. Piénselo tranquilo, compadre, y después me diga. Una reflexión. Gracias a la vida que nos da tanto. A ver si damos.
Yes, Rafael. Do we have any sound here? Or turn up 4 on the... Yes, yes. Rafael Medina. Thank you. Thank you. And Pedro, maybe a little bit more. Actually, we can go on for as long as we want, really. The truth is that we are a movable feast, and when Daniel Ellsberg spoke, we went on till 2:30 in the afternoon. We were just so happy to have him when he received our Sacco and Vanzetti Award. So let's have some conversation. Syncretism. I love that word, and my best reminder of that word is a saint that they have in Santiago Atitlan, which is on Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And his name is Mashimon. Mashimon. Have you heard of Mashimon? He's a saint who is very fond of the finer things, if you will. And to revere him, you bring a little whiskey and maybe a nice piece of fabric to honor Mashimon, who and he loves cigars too, very fond of cigars and hats. Yes, and he gets paraded through the streets of the Sutuil speaking Santiago Atitlan on Semana Santa, Holy Week. That's my best saint from the indigenous Guatemala, reinterpreting Catholic, let's say, religion or oppression or something like that. Anyway, that's where we start. I know Jose wanted to say some words to and about Pedro, or maybe a question or an observation. Yes.
Well, before Pedro gets into the syncretism, I want to thank Pedro for visiting Community Church of Boston and addressing the fact that although we have an affiliation with the Unitarian Universalists, we are, I think, a great example of this dialogue between organized institutions and this attempt to mix, to combine, and to unload the cultural heritages that we bring from the walks and the ways we have been at. So Pedro, you are a great example of that richness that comes to Community Church of Boston. Thank you for coming. You have planted many, I think, seeds for us to grow, to nurture in this attempt of building an organization here at the heart of Boston, enriched by the voices and the experiences from people like you. And also, you represent that connection from academia to the barrio, to the neighborhoods. So this is, I think this morning we have enjoyed this dialogue, this exchange. I have a question though. When you were referring to how in the traditions of the pre-Hispanic religions or cultures, take it back, cultures, there was this sense of a balance, this pursuit of a balance. My question is, when you talk or you study Christianity, do you see a sense of a balance, an attempt to find balance, or do you see a clear intent of praising one creed, one approach, and annihilating, exterminating other approaches, other attempts?
Well, thank you for that question. I love those questions because
The sound is off.
Soft. Hello. Yep. Is that better? Yeah. All right. So I think we need to clarify that Christianity in general, Catholicism also, there's plenty of very good, incredible things that are very beneficial that could be used and have been used by individuals and groups to make communities better, to what Martin Luther King called the beloved communities. So there's absolutely lots and lots of things that can be brought in through Christianity. Important to know that once Christianity arrives in the Mesoamerican landscape with all these different groups, neither Christianity nor the indigenous groups were ever the same again. So that's part of that dialogue. And what's that third thing that happens when these two visions collide or come together? They can collide violently, as they have, but they can also cooperate and do great. When the Jesuits throughout, especially in Brazil, but in El Salvador and all kinds of places, when these good priests, very excellent missionaries, have gone to do good in the world, you know, then suddenly there's a benefit, and the oppressed and the less, you know, and the less fortunate have been elevated. It's exactly when people on the other side and people on the positions of power are very afraid and very offended when they see progress from the masses, from the poor. Suddenly, because why? Because they're going to be like us. They're going to think they're like us if they improve their economic condition. Suddenly, they're going to want power. And so that's really the issue in these conversations between religions. It's absolutely possible to have this dialogue and find both the humanity in both of these wealth of tradition, all kinds of things that, and find a third way out, and betterment for everybody. Absolutely, there's no, you know, that's what I'm saying, that it's not just a bashing of Christianity in general, or Catholicism in particular. It's simply that what rules then that conversation? Does it, you know, some people, missionaries, hardworking, church-going people go and do good in the world, and then suddenly you hear this other group of folks, when they see that it's improvement, boom, you know, and then you get gentrification, and then you get, you know, send them to war, and then you economic distress, more arms, more drugs. You know, as soon as you see an elevation and an opportunity for the poor and the oppressed to actually find some freedom, find some better footing, find some dignity, that is a threat. Because the next thing you know, they want to do is vote. Then they want to have money in the bank. God forbid. So religious principles, whether they're Christian or indigenous, they shouldn't be in any way detrimental to anyone. It is this hard line behind it that says, you're only worth something when I say you do. You're only worth what I dictate. In other words, this Christian European mindset, and I'm going to say it all the way through, this Christian white mindset of hard line is what really messes everything up. Because the question is, who exactly do they serve? Are you serving the real goodness of the gospel, bringing the good news of the Lord with you and us? But the bad news is that there's some guys in the back waiting for you to buy into it so they can screw you over. That's the problem, not the actual interactions of people that are trying to do good in the world. And this is what's so sad and so difficult. That's the dilemma for Christianity, is that it has to have a conversation within itself to purge, to clean those folks out of that power structure. That's the conversation that I've been saying, the dialectic approach that I'm saying, that groups like this are actually doing, but you have to do it with that intentionality to grab that other person and discover that common humanity, whether you are from whatever persuasion, Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever. That's why it is possible. Of course it is possible, because it's human-made, those problems, and therefore they have human solutions. It had not been divinely decided that we should kill each other, whether in Gaza or in Mexico or in anywhere. That's the stuff that needs to be sorted out in this dialectic thing. It's just not to say, like I said before, it's going to be nice and, you know, fluffy, and no, it's gotta have some milonga style stuff where you have an intimate conversation with somebody who's willing to listen and try to understand what this person is saying to you. And in doing so, and receiving you, now I can hear you. I can see you and your humanity. And that's what this possibility is about. That's how you bring life out of that these difficult moments, this violence, this death that has been served to all of us and all of our ancestors, and is served right now. But so that's so that if I can bring it to a short answer, of course, there's the conversation, the dialogue is not inherent that neither the indigenous or the Christian world is inherently bound to just one has to dominate the other. Not at all. That's all these narratives of power. They turn the beauty and the divine aspects of religion into a narrative of power, into a justification to do as they will, because they're going to raise and elevate everything to an existential threat that doesn't conform, that does not conform into what they need or they want in order to feel that they're in power and in control. So the question, who is it about? Is it about God? Or are you trying to be God? Is it about people? Is you trying to be and reinvent people, recreate them at your own image, like a God would? That's what all these forces behind Christianity have done. They're not doing these masses and these services to praise God. They're designed to praise themselves and to have you praise them. And you, as a believer, have the opportunity to get that and reclaim that. That's the function of places like this, of meetings like this, of dialogues like this. It has to be. Because if you're not going to have dialogues that take back the power from those people who have taken it from you and from me, then don't have the dialogues. Don't gather in Sunday masses. Don't waste your time if you're not going to have this sort of thing. Because it has to have that purpose at the end, to find the humanity, to eliminate that sense of, I'm on top and you're at the bottom because I said so. Because God wants it that way. BS. Not at all. Not at all. But it's up to you to take back the power to these dialectic exchanges with that purpose in mind, with the music, with the eating, with the smell, everything. It's a dialectic exchange to find the common humanity and find together the best way forward. That's when you want to find a way to coexist, when you give the power for those who have taken it from us. That's how you do it. That's my answer. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be hanging around.
Charlie, you're next. Go ahead.
Thank you for this excellent presentation. There's one thing I'm going to do is go back and replay the video and stop at all those slides you had to skip over and look at them for real. I have 100 questions, but I have to pick one. And the one I'm most interested in is, I know that the various Protestant evangelical churches have made a lot of effort to penetrate into Latin America. And how is that affecting the dialogue you're talking about?
I mean, I do all the lectures on folk saints like Santa Muerte and others. And, if you look at the data coming from the Pew Research Center, for example, you will see that in the last, say, almost 100 years, Catholicism had lost 10, 15%, maybe 20%, roughly, from the 90s to like mid-60s. And Protestantism has gained about 10, 15%. In the 15, 20, 19 maybe, between 15 and 19%. But unaffiliated people in the last 2 or 3 decades alone is staggering, the speed that is taken in terms of an affiliation of entirety of Christianity. So what in essence is, I guess, to the question, I correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but I think it's, so what's going to happen next, so to speak? what to expect next. And it's a key thing to see in the affiliated part, because if you really were able to sort of see these flat numbers in a chart, and then really get into, let me see what is actually a Catholic. Let me really see how many are pure Catholics in the right-wing way of the mindset. Really. And then you will see that the Catholics alone will have all kinds of multiple belongings, all kinds of incredible ways of doing things, all kinds of understanding that are actually contradictory. They have some general notions of the Virgin Mary of Guadalupe, maybe, but there's a lot of people that love Machimon in Guatemala. You know, and if you go to other places like Tepito, Mexico, right at the heart of Mexico City, the Catholic Church got run out, completely out. The Catholic Church. And in its place, they elevated an effigy 70 feet tall of Santa Muerta. It's very scary looking from afar, but it's like, sort of like telling you, yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? But like challenging, like putting like an asterisk mirror against these powerful things. What they're telling you is like, we're sick of these narratives of Christians coming to tell us what to think, how to believe, and only if we do as they see fit, do we have any value, are we going to be safe? Well, maybe these people didn't want to be safe to begin with. Nobody invited the Christians over. And when you go to Tepito, places like that, you will see exactly what's going to happen in the future. Unlike Europe, it is not a move to secularism, where people just think of church, oh yes, culturally thing that you do, you get married in the church, you go to Sunday church services, and maybe you go to catechism. No. In the global south, in the Americas, in my country, Mexico, what you see is first a move from Catholicism to Protestantism first. And you see it still in Latin America, all kinds of Protestant groups. And I can tell you 1,000 terrible things that Protestant groups have done in line with the Christians we call Catholics. You know, just look at Rios Monte in Guatemala. It wouldn't take long before you find fault with, you know, evangelical Christians, for example, and their connection to the US of A. So in the global south, what we see is not a move from whatever cultural society, Christianity to secularism. It's some of that. But what you see is a sort of a revival, a resurgence of all ways, of all Christian and indigenous ways. Of course, now syncretized, or now evolved into some other ways, because people don't, this is the stuff that has been concealed from all of us. This is part of that big lie that was put over our eyes to cover to not let us know about our own heritage as indigenous people, as mixed race folks in the Americas, in Mexico. Because they wanted to lie to us. They wanted to not know that only the Christian stories of origin are worth it. Everything else is the devil. Everything else, that's the speech. And what people are doing in the Americas, in Mexico, they're like, no, thank you. You know, we're done with Christianity. We're just done with it. A lot of people, not all of them, is still majority Catholic, majority Christian, but very rapidly unraveling. Because why? Because the reality on the ground, the violence on the ground, the cartels on the ground, the death on the ground is such that they're way closer to death than they are to God. And whatever God they're praying to Christianity, it's not answering. It's not delivering. So the faith that you see before the Spaniards arrived, before the Europeans arrived, is there. The faith you see through colonial times is still there. The difference is it's no longer controlled by Christianity, whether Protestant or Catholic. It's now being taken over by individuals, by groups of people throughout. There is no central organization of Santa Muerte. But there's over 12 million people. Some people say up to 20 million. Just 12 million is a lot of people. How many people are there in El Salvador? How many? 6 million. 2 times El Salvador within Mexico alone, at least, of devotees. And a lot of them call themselves Catholic. So the mixture is a revival and a retaking of all ways, of all the ways, even the ones, just anything that works. anything that works. And so the future in the case, instead of going to secularism, is going to any mixture, old ways, new ways, any emergence, and this is why you see the fluidity of the religions of Latin America right now moving to the unaffiliated part of these charts that I tell you about. You went to look at that, what's truly happening is fascinating. And then all people of my age will say, well, you know, Catholics and the Protestants, and they'll say, yeah, Catholic Protestants, and all these religions, oh, they don't like the Catholic Church, they like the Catholic Church, maybe there's evangelicals and the which is Pentecostals and whatever. New generations say, Christ who? New generations, Catholic what? Evangelical what? Why? Because they don't care. Because Christianity as a whole has no relevance in their day-to-day life. Their gods are Instagram, YouTube. That's where they're finding meaning and belonging, not in churches. In churches, they don't know what to do. They don't really know how to react because they're so connected and tied up by their own orthodoxy that they don't even know how to react, most of them. So the future at this point is clearly, if you were to fast forward 40 years, 50 years, clearly on the side of the unaffiliates. And you will see more and more the dying off of Christianity and Christianity in the right wing fashion, particularly, whether it's Protestant or Catholic. Why? Because the reality on the ground it tells a whole different story of what the normative ideas that these devotions want to sell to the masses. And so the new peoples finding their own ways of dealing with whatever their issue is, belonging, religion, what to believe in, and you can argue they might be lost, they might, but they're gonna do it their way because the adults in the room and the grandpas in the room have no idea how to talk to these kids. Have no idea. And so they don't know how to make relevant whatever devotional, whatever doctrinal ideas you had in the past. They just don't measure up to the reality on the ground, to the interconnectedness on the ground and everywhere. So you want to find a way to evolve into a religion the way that would be able, they're already preparing the ground for this dialectic approach that I'm telling you about. They're all ready for these conversations in their terms, not in yours, whether you're Christian or whatever. It doesn't matter, because if you're not relevant, it doesn't matter. And if they don't feel the relevance of any religious belief, anyone, just fill in the blank, they're going to go find their own. They're going to make up their own, which is exactly what humans have done throughout history. Make sense?
Yeah.
Pedro,
Sí.
thank you for being here today. It's so important to talk about religion when we're going through a different crusade. Crusade against Arabs right now, everywhere, because Palestinians have been called Arabs. They are away from their the name of their country. And in Brazil, I'm Brazilian. I'm Latin American woman, and I canceled my membership of the Catholic Church a long time ago. And then I tried going to an evangelical church. That's how we call Protestantism in Brazil. We went to evangelical church, and it didn't work either, because we don't know how to talk to God. If it's a she, her, he, him, they, them. So right now, I have a 16-year-old son who has been born and raised here in the United States, who has never been to a church, any church, or a synagogue, or a mosque. So I'm unaffiliated, and he as well. So we're still debating abortion in Latin America big time, and politicians are not going with us either, because they think countries are also a way of saying which religion you belong. So they think that we have to go with the religion's beliefs, to rule on people. And we don't vote for politicians that are still thinking religion and the country are the same. But in Brazil, we do, because pastors, different from priests, are going to Congress and making laws that going big setbacks in our country people. So I want you to talk about this change, about being preaching inside a church or any house of God, and then taking those rules into the Congress and passing laws that are really affecting the global South. And also, I would like to ask you to also talk about in the beginning of colonialism, when the Spaniards and Portuguese went to Latin America, they were saying that indigenous, and then later on, the Negroes from Africa were savages. And now they're calling all Arabs and Muslims terrorists. So this is a new approach of saying those are bad and shadows, and we are light, and we are what you have to follow. Thanks.
Well, I mean, it's a loaded thing because it's been fascinating. But I'm kind of making the point of the growth and the rapid growth of unaffiliated people, disenchanted people, that they don't see the relevance of any particular doctrine. And so that's precisely that. You look at it in this lens that we talked about. It's a dialogue. You know, it's just that the dialogue is you can only enter a dialogue if you subscribe to any of these particular cosmologies. And the other guy says, like, no, tell me why your cosmology matters. Like, you are completely out of there. You don't understand what's happening on the ground. And so eventually those folks will realize that there is a need for a new cosmology. They're going to have to figure out what works for them. And there's a transitional period right now that we're witnessing before our eyes where people are like trying to make sense, because there is a very well-documented human need to find the transcendent, to find what we call these religious traditions. It really is, it's a human thing that is always trying to find meaning and belonging all the time. And so what they're going to do, they're going to, according to what the theories that we have, we can see and that we understand, not from now, but from almost 100 years ago, we saw this coming in the world of religion studies. They knew this would happen. Not exactly how, but they knew that was meant, that was actually, that was part in the, even one of my professors and mentor, Harvey Cox, I took your classes with him, and he was really kind with me to guide me to a few questions on my own. He was basically saying this. He was saying this, the very notion. And so you will see, like, we don't know how to deal with the new money in capitalism. We don't know how to tap into the high-tech world and the mindset of that and what matters. We don't know how to understand and really help the LGBTQ community about the future. They're doing it on their own. And they're going to establish how they function, and everybody's going to have to deal with that. You know, but you see the clash immediately, because if you don't conform to whatever's established, you don't matter. You have to conform as part of, like, in other words, you have to recognize my authority over you before I even listen to you. And that's what's not being taken anymore by a lot of folks. And I think a lot of religions don't fully comprehend what they're facing. And so to go back to this new way of politicians being hardliners and based on the mobilizing their bases based on religious fear, that's exactly the way it's been done forever. It's not new at all. It's exactly the same technique, scapegoating the other, so that you can justify your position and your actions. You know, what you're trying to do there is to galvanize your supporters so that whatever they believe individually, maybe they don't really hate the LGBTQ community, maybe they're fine with it, but because they belong to a particular denomination that is always preaching, oh, these people are going to burn it, whatever it is, they preach against that. They begin, you know, to have to make these distinctions. Am I in? Am I part of this group? And so therefore I am against that, you know? Or am I going to give my individuality the upper hand and say, no, wait a minute, you're not going to go against these kids. Let them be. Let them discover themselves. You know? And so what happens is that the individuality of thought is absorbed, consumed, and galvanized by the social identity of the group, whatever the group, political party, the religious affiliation, and then people just had to make this, am I in, I'm against abortion, or no, I'm actually pro the person, the person needed some help. And that's the dilemma that people have to face and make up their own minds ultimately. And most people just basically relinquish their ability to think. And this is what John F. Kennedy once says, basically the idea is like, he really disliked the people that enjoy the benefit of opinion without the discomfort of thought. So what you're going to see in the situation is a lot of people following whatever the leader is, because it's much easier than having to actually fess up and go through a process of thinking for yourself, where you have to enter into a dialogue with the other that you don't understand so that you can find common humanity. That's a lot of work. They just want to go to church on Sunday, check a box, throw some money on the thing, and get out. Until it happens to them. And then they really have a dilemma at home. That's when they're going to be, that's when that conversation is going to be brought hard at home. And then they're going to have to make a choice. Am I this? And therefore I'm going to go against my kid or against my neighbor? Or am I going to affirm the individual in spite of what the price is to pay from the social identity that they belong to? In other words, we need a new belonging. That's the argument for discovering a new way to belong. Multiple belongings. And you can be a believer of Jesus, and you can be LGBTQ, and you can be a samurai, and you can be, yes. That's the path forward, where none of us has to be held and approved by any white or any Christian gaze. Anyone else's gaze. But we, through dialogue, through exchange, through finding our common humanity, can find that element that only comes when we enter in a real discussion, in a real dialogue, where we find new ways, the renovation, the renewal of this thing. When we give this, in this conversation, the potential for life, the upper hand. That's what Rafael is talking about in his song. This is what I've been saying. This is what I think so a long time ago from Russia. This is not new. It's new to us because we're just facing this thing, but this conversation has been going on in all the circles forever, because this is the stuff that makes and breaks societies. This is the stuff of how invasions are justified, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right, well.
Pedro,
Yes.
thank you so much. This has been a rich, rich time together. Pedro Morales, Rafael Medina, and all of the rest of you. We want to close with, before our lunch, which is very appropriate. It's called casamiento, which is a very traditional Central American dish. That casamiento, I don't know if it comes from being married, like casarse, or caceria, like the hunting. Whatever got hunted that day, or else it's about being married. Dude, you're married to me. This is what you get for lunch today. I don't know which it is, but before we sit down to a beautiful lunch, and we invite you all to be with us here present to enjoy Luis Guzman's lunch every Sunday. But we want to just take you through, if you will spotlight this for me, Amar, these beautiful posters that came from Donna Burford, and they were donated to us. These are remembering the 1980s struggle against U.S. brutality in Central America. This is El Salvador. This is Nicaragua. This is Arts for New Nicaragua. I went on one of those delegations in 1987, if you could believe it. This is more Central America and Southern Africa activism. It's about fighting apartheid and fighting U.S. intervention in Central America. This is Viva la Revolución Americana. Of course, you know that image. And this is a women's poster, Women's Encampment for a Future of Peace and Justice, 1983. Now we'll take you over here to this beautiful large one that is about Sandino and Carlos Fonseca Amador. Again, it's about the Nicaraguan struggle for literacy. And it says, Sandino and Fonseca are teaching literacy, and how about you? Next, I want to take you to the image by Katie Miranda El Al of Mary, the Palestinian mother in a hijab, taking Jesus, the Palestinian man in his keffiyeh, off of the cross. So moving for this moment. And finally, the keffiyehs of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And finally, to the casamiento, which we will enjoy right now, and we show you a tiny bit of it right now. This is what Luis Guzman has prepared for us. The rice and beans and the protein underneath. Thank you, Rafael, for showing us that. And on that note, we thank everybody for being with us today, and we invite you to join us again and be in solidarity and in community with us, Community Church of Boston. We love you, and we hope to see you very soon. Hasta muy